Good evening. Hope you're all doing well. Today we're learning Maseches Nedarim Daf Samech Aleph. And in this daf, we're going to be continuing with shilas as it relates to different konams, different commitments or restrictions on wine. And here we're going to jump into something that we have no ability to celebrate because we don't know when Yovel is. We know when Shemitah is, but we don't know which of every 7 years is the final one. The Yovel, of course, is not the 49th year, but it is the 50th year. And one of the chakiras about the 50th year is, does it belong as part of the first 49 with an addendum of the 50th? Or no, is it 49, cut, and then 50 is part of the next set of numbers?
Note yourself.
That's the Gemara's question over here, 7 lines down on Daf Samech Aleph Amud Aleph.
So that would mean it's 2 years in a row.
That's for sure the case.
Okay.
That's for sure the case. The question is, this is the case here. Ibaya lahu, 5 lines down actually. Amar yayin shani tom yovel. This wine I'm not going to have for a yovel. That's your neder. So my shnas chamishim. How do we look at the 50th year? Do we say 50 is part of the beginning and therefore it's part of the neder, or is 50 part of the next cycle and therefore it's not part of the neder? Says the Gemara. Do we say kilifnei chamishim or kilachar chamishim? And the Gemara responds with a brisa. Toshma detanya plukta Rabbi Yehuda v'Rabbanan. We have a brisa that discusses the shitas of Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanan in this regard. The pasuk says v'kidashtem shnas chamishim shana. And how do we view the 50th year? So the Gemara says, Shnasa chamishim atamone, you count the 50th year, v'i atamone, shnas chamishim v'achas. The 50th year and the 51st year are not trunked together. Mikan amru yovel eino ola leminyan shavua. The yovel year doesn't count as the next set of 7, right? So we have 49 years. The 50th year does not count as 51 through 57. It does not count as that way. Therefore, this shita of the Rabbanan would be of the opinion that the 50th year is part of the first trunk. And therefore, we're done. And we would say that it's usher to drink wine during that 50th year. Mashain came halfway down. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Yovel Ola Leminyan Shua. Yovel, the 50th year, does count as part of the next 7 years. And therefore, your Shvua ends at the end of year 49. So, Chakira, how do we treat the 50th year? The Brisa continues, Amr lo Rabbi Yehuda. According to Rabbi Yehuda, who says that the 50th year is really part of the next cycle, Harehu Omer sheishanim tizras sadecha ve'en kana l'chomesh. If you want to say Yovel is part of the next cycle, so that means that Yovel is really year 1 of the next 7. And that means year 7 is also Shemitah. What are we left with? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's only 5 years. And according to Rabbi Yehuda's math, it doesn't stem with the pasuk, because the pasuk says, if you say that the Yovel, the whole count would have been off. You had to add another year for what we're talking about, according to the Tanna Kama. Because what it meant is the 50th year would happen, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then Shemitah. According to this, according to Rabbi Yehuda, year 1 is Yovel, and therefore there's only 5 years between Yovel and the next Shemitah, which is impossible according to the Psukim. So he says back to them, Amar Lehem, Rabbi Yehuda pushes back. He says, L'divrechem, you have a problem as well. Even according to your Shita, Hareyu Omer v'asas es hatua l'shalosh shanim. The Torah gives us a guarantee, a rare occurrence in the Torah. We have a guarantee of parnasa, of crops. And it's only supposed to be for 3 years. It's supposed to be for Shnas Shemitah. It's supposed to then be for Shnas Yovel. And then enough to get into the next year. Enough, just enough, says the Gemara. But according to the opinion of the Tanna Kama, Harei Kan Arba, because you're adding in a whole other year. So therefore, L'shitaschem, it's also very difficult, says Rabbi Yehuda. The Gemara responds 4 lines from the bottom on Samech Aleph, Amud Aleph, Ela, Ikala Ukma, it could just be that when Rabbi Yehuda says, when I was talking about my case, it's Beshar Shnei Shavuot, Dilinami, Ikal Ukma Beshar Shnei Shavuot. We're not talking about a cycle of Shemitah with Yovel at the end. We're talking about Stam. It's a Stam. In a regular year, this says Sheishan Tizras Sadecha. So too by me, says Rabbi Yehuda. In a regular year, I'll have 3 years of guaranteed food. And there's a Chiddush in the 4th year, in the 7th cycle. We just don't know how all the math works according to both of them. I mean, we know how it works according to each of them. We don't know how we paskin. But that is what the Gemara concludes. So we asked our question, and we'll just summarize this first Amud, which is, how do we view the 50th year? If a person takes a restriction upon themselves about Yovel, does the 50th year count, yes or no? Machlokes Tanoim. And the Gemara says that both of their shitas can withstand the tests of the questions of the Gemara. And then our Gemara quotes from the Mishnah we had learned many days ago, Ad HaPesach, if a person says up until Pesach, so there was a machlokes about this. Do we say that's only up until Pesach, or does it mean through Pesach. That was a machlokas. The Memra, what's implied from here, because Rabbi Meir is one of the Baalei Plukta in our Mishnah, the Memra, this seems to imply to Rabbi Meir Savar, that Rabbi Meir is of the opinion, Lo ma'ayil inish nafshe, turning to the top of the next page, let's sveka, that according to Rabbi Meir, we don't even enter ourselves into a case of safek. Obviously, he meant a very specific intention with his comment. And if we look back at the beginning of the parak, let's look at Rav Meir. Rav Meir said, Asar ad sheyagia. It's asar until the holiday starts, but the holiday is fine. It's pasha what he meant. Why do we say that? Because he never would have been nichnas himself into the safek of Pesach. Pasha, that's going to be confusing. So obviously he must have meant that it stops the day before Pesach. So says the Gemara, that's really not so simple. Because as we see on the top of Samach Aleph Amud Beis, let's just finish out the machlokes. That's Rav Meir. Rabbi Yossi Savar Ma'ayil Inish Nafshe L'Sveika. Rabbi Yossi in our Mishnah, who says that when a person makes a neder like this, then it's all the way through Pesach. He clearly is of the opinion that Ma'ayil Inish Nafshe L'Sveika, a person will bring upon themselves difficult halachic scenarios. But the Gemara says that this has to be wrong. Or minhi, we have a source in the Tanaim that doesn't agree with this. A man was married twice. He was married to Rachel and had 2 daughters, and then he was married to Leah and had 2 daughters. Now, obviously, in each marriage, there's one daughter that's older than the other. And then he says the following line: "Ve'omar kidashti es biti hagdola." I agreed to marry off my oldest daughter. Ve'eni yodea im gdola shebegdolos. I don't know if it's the oldest of my first wives of Rachel's, im gedola shebektanos, or the older of my second wife of Leah. I don't know which daughter I was referring to. V'im, or the third possibility is ktana shebegdolos, is Rachel's second daughter, who's older than the other daughters. Shehi gdola mina gdola shebektanos. We don't know. So says the Gemara, kulan asuras divri Rav Meir. Rav Meir treats this case l'chumra, which is a stira to our Mishnah. Rav Meir in our Mishnah, we were of the opinion that a person is not going to be ma'ayil inish nafshe l'sveika, but here he certainly did that. Chutz min aktana shebektanos. Of course, the youngest of the girls is allowed to marry because she's not older than anybody. That's for sure. So that's what the Gemara pushes back. And Rav Yosef or kulan mutaros chutz min agadolos shebekdolos. Here it seems to be the reverse. Here, in this case, Rav Yossi was the one who said everyone's allowed to marry. Except the oldest of all of the women, all of the daughters, and Rav Meir was the machmir. So that's a stira to our case where Rav Meir was the mekel. So the Gemara says you're right. Amar Rabbi Chanina, a third of the way down, heading to the Mishnah. Amar Rabbi Chanina bar Avdimi, Amar Rab muchlefes hashita. You're correct. The initial presentation of our machlokes Rav Meir. Really, our Mishnah, the Shitas are backwards in our Mishnah. Really, Rav Meir is the one who would say that we're machmir through Pesach, and Rabbi Yossi would say only up to Pesach. And the Gemara says about Tanya, and it brings a raya to support this opinion that Rav Meir should have been the one who was machmir. Ze'aklal, we'll see this in the Mishnah in 5 lines, so it's a little bit out of context now. But Ze'aklal, here's a general rule. Koshezmanu kavu avamar ad pinei. If a person has a holiday like the Shalosh Regalim, that's what the Mafarish says over here, that Zmanu kavu is referring to holidays, moments in the calendar that are fixed, and a person says ad pinei, Rav Meir Amar ad sheyetze, then it applies until the end of that holiday. Machmir l'chumra, that's l'shitaso. Rav Yossi Omer ad sheyagia. So we wanted to say Pshat and Rav Meir was a certain way. It turns out that our Mishnah has a mistake in it. And if you were to look back at our Mishnah at the beginning of this parak on Daf Samach Amud Aleph, really the language should be changed. It should be Rav Meir Oser ad sheyetze and Rav Yossi Omer ad sheyagia. That would be the nafkamina. Our Mishnah is backwards, and it needs to be corrected. That brings us to the next Mishnah, which is just about halfway down on Samach Aleph, Amud Beis. We'll be going until the 2 dots toward the bottom of the page, 3 lines from the bottom, and then we'll stop. The Mishnah says, Ad ha-katzir, ad ha-batzir, ad ha-masik. These are 3 types of harvesting, one for grains, one for grapes, and one for olives. And a person made a neder, I'm not going to drink wine until these times. We don't know. Is it ad ve'ad bichlal or ad ve'eno ad bichlal? We don't know. So the Gemara says, Eino aser ala ad shiagia. It's going to be lenient. We're going to say up until the time that starts. So that's ad ve'lo ad bichlal. Says the Gemara, Ze'aklal, here's the general rule. Kol shezmanu kavu avam ad shiagia. When a person says, makes a neder ad shiagia, so, and it's about something that's kavua, like a holiday, we assume his intention is aser ad shiagia. No one plans to include Pesach when they make commitments like that. Even just think in halachic terms, you have to make kiddush on Yontif. Yeah, there's no way he intended to specifically exclude saying kiddush. That's not reasonable. But Amar ad sheyehei, then Asr ad sheyetze. If his language is that it has to be that it's Asr through the holiday, then Pashat it'll be Asr until the end. What about a neder which is not regular? If I say like until a random Tuesday, that's a kol zman she'eno kavua. So kol she'ein zmano kavua bein amar ad she'yehei bein amar ad she'yagia eino aser ela ad she'yagia. They were makel entirely. By the case of the kavua, we were machmir when your language was explicit about being through that zman. That's not true in other cases. In other cases, we're more lenient. If a person says ad hakayitz, which typically in modern parlance means until the spring or until the summer, here it means until the harvest. That's ad sheyehei hakayitz ad sheyaschilu ha'am lehachnis bekalkalos. Then it will be usher up until the time that baskets are being brought in from the harvest. We don't yet know what that means. We'll discuss it in the Gemara. If a person's language is ad sheyavor hakayitz, then ad sheyikpelu hamiktzos. If a person makes a neder up until the end of the harvesting, then ad sheyikpelu hamiktzos. It's until they put away their shears, until they put away their scissors, which were used to cut things off of the vine. And that would then be usher. And a couple of brises here in the Gemara, which will bring us to the end of the daf today. And then tomorrow you can see is a little bit of a fatter daf, a little bit more meat on the bone. What?
Normal daf.
Not for this Masech. That's not. I'm a little anxious just looking at this, and it doesn't even compare to. Remember brachos? Right, the whole page was a big box.
Like this.
Oh my gosh! Yeah, I know. Now it makes me nervous. That's why these Masechtas are a double-edged sword. So the Gemara says, opening 10 lines from the bottom, Tana, we have a brisa, Kalkala Sha'amru, when the Mishnah says that once the baskets are brought in, then the neder's over, that's Kalkala Sha'amru, that's Kalkala Shal Ta'enim V'lo Kalkala Shal Anavim. It's talking about dates, which is further along in the harvesting process, but not grapes. Tanya, the Brisa writes, "Anoder miperos hakayitz." If a person makes a neder from fruits of the harvest, ein aser ela b'te'enim. The only limitation is by te'enim. Rashba gomer anavim bichlal te'enim. That's not true. Really, the iser is more expansive. It's true of both dates and of grapes. My time of the Tanakama. Why was the Tanakama of the opinion that there's a difference between te'enim and anavim in regards to peros hakayitz when a person makes a neder on peros hakayitz? Because kasabar te'enim miktzatsan biyada, that when you're going to be harvesting dates, those you pluck with your bare hands. And if that's the case, so that's what should be aser. But anavim lo miktzatsan biyada. But grapes are different. You don't cut them with your hands. We get them a little bit on the branch. The clusters that we have in the bags from the store, they have the branch, but the branches are pretty dry. Still hard to tear them. Still, it's possible for the smaller ones, but the thicker parts of the branch, we would take scissors and cut them. That's how we serve them in our house. We cut 10 grapes in a little shop. We could cut it and put it down. It says the Gemara that anavim lo mixes on biyadan. Rashbag, what did he hold? That's not true. Rashbag savar anavim nami ki mirdadon. When the branch of the grapes dry out, you don't need scissors. Mixas on biyada. And because that's true, therefore Rashbag argues on the Tanakama and says that anavim are bechlal te'enim. We'll stop right here and pick up in your Hashem tomorrow with Daf Samach Beis. Wishing you all a beautiful night and a beautiful Lichtig Chanukah.